In October 2021, it was announced by Ring of Honor Wrestling and their parent company Sinclair Broadcasting Group that ROH will be going on hiatus until April of 2022. Contracts will be terminated for most by the end of this year. The news seemed to shock many fans, but for many longtime ROH fans, it harkened back to darker days when the company was always seemingly on its last legs financially. So let's take a look back at Ring of Honor, the little company that could. Ring of Honor was founded in the ashes of the wrestling boom of the 1990s. It was February 2002. WCW was purchased by WWE, ECW went bankrupt and would soon become WWE's property, and TNA was still in its planning stages. Ring of Honor would seize the opportunity. There was no more alternative for the pro wrestling fan to WWE's sports entertainment. Now was the perfect time to create a new company, to form an identity unlike anything else in wrestling. The idea was simple: get the best talent available on the East Coast independents, put on a show maybe once a month, let them tear down the house, sell the videotape, and profit. The roster would be made up of young upcoming talent and recently released talent from the former Big Three. And sure, independent companies had used former TV stars since forever, but there's a huge difference between King Kong Bundy coming in for a 3-minute squash and Eddie Guerrero coming into ROH and putting on a classic with Super Crazy. ROH was able to field this kind of roster right out of the gate thanks to a pretty decent amount of seed money from its original owner, RF Video. RF Video earned quick success in the mid-1990s selling ECW and other wrestling tapes through the mail. They'd shift to online sales and sales at shows and eventually shift over to DVDs. RF Video had the capital, experience, and infrastructure to put this all together, but more on them later. But what's a wrestling company without a booker? For that role, Paul Heyman acolyte Gabe Sapolsky was brought in. Sapolsky had done every job imaginable for ECW and sat under the Heyman learning tree for most of its peak years. Now he could revolutionize wrestling on his own with a new vision. Gabe's vision for ROH was similar to Heyman's vision for a new ECW before it ultimately closed. But he also found direct inspiration from the West Coast in the form of the 2001 King of the Indies tournament. Top names from around the country putting on matches that were unlike anything anyone had seen in the United States. Gabe and ROH were going to combine high-flying action, mat-based technique, simple competition-based stories, and respect. All these elements would create a new brand of wrestling. Ring of Honor would soon find out. Fans were ready. Ring of Honor's first show would take place February 23, 2002, from Philly's Murphy Rec Center. The Era of Honor Begins, as it was known, received high praise from fans and media alike. The tape became an instant must-have for fans after results from the show got out, and the DVD would become the starting point for many completionist collectors. The show featured a hybrid of wrestling styles. There was the unforgiving power of the Hit Squad, the savage violence of natural-born sinners, there was the acrobatics in the ultimate aerial elimination match, Eddie Guerrero versus Super Crazy, and the main event that changed everything, Low Key versus American Dragon versus Christopher Daniels. Over the next several months, ROH built its identity as the place for young, hungry wrestlers to come and put themselves on the wrestling map. Stars that would become household names like Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, CM Punk, AJ Styles, Mickie James, and others would make their debuts. Talents like Quiet Storm, Brian XL, Xavier, and the SAT, while seemingly forgotten by most, were incredibly important to Ring of Honor at the beginning. By 2004, ROH was riding high. They'd expanded outside of Philadelphia to Cambridge, Massachusetts, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Dayton, Ohio, and Queens, New York. And they were holding 1 or 2 events a month. And they'd crowned their first 3 champions: Low Key, Xavier, and Samoa Joe, respectively. They also had evolved their stories to being a bit more elaborate and violent. They were no longer just ring-based and who was better. Feuds like Homicide versus Steve Corino and CM Punk versus Raven brought some hatred into ROH storytelling. However, Ring of Honor would quickly run into controversy. A local Philadelphia news channel had done a sting in partnership with Perverted Justice to expose local child predators. one of whom was alleged to have been RF Video and ROH owner Rob Feinstein. Someone alleged to be Feinstein came to the Sting house to meet someone he'd been chatting with online and thought was a 14-year-old boy. This segment produced the now infamous "I'll pretend you said 18" message. The rest of Ring of Honor went into immediate damage control. They announced Feinstein would no longer be involved in the promotion. TNA Wrestling pulled all their contracted stars like AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. Things were not looking good. In June of that year, it was revealed that Feinstein was still involved with the company. Very soon after, RF sold his stake in Ring of Honor to a partner, Doug Gentry. RF Video and Feinstein were now 100% out of ROH's business. ROH took over its own production and DVD distribution, but fans felt slighted. They were lied to, deceived by the company they were so passionate about. Ring of Honor's business took a sharp downturn for quite some time, but then came Joe vs. CM Punk and Cary Silkin. Business for ROH declined steadily for months. Gabe Sapolsky kept building feuds and storylines even though the company seemed doomed. One major feud he was building was CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. Joe was the reigning ROH World Champion and had been for over a year. CM Punk wanted that belt. A simple story to tell, but Joe and Punk would go on to have 3 legendary matches in 2004, their first 2 bouts going to 1-hour draws, which was unheard of at the time. And this feud is credited with bringing back many ROH fans, and bringing in new fans altogether. It was the feud that saved Ring of Honor. But to see how Ring of Honor was really saved that year, you need to look past the ring and to the ownership. In the fall of 2004, ROH was sold to New York City ticket broker and lifelong wrestling fan Cary Silkin. Cary was passionate about wrestling and had made several trips to MSG back in the Bruno days, and he knew that the business needed Ring of Honor, so he bought in. Cary would be hands-off for the most part creatively, allowing Gabe to book his shows his way. He was a consistent sight at ringside for shows and thanking fans on the way out for coming to the show. The fans loved him. With this investment and an influx of new stars like Jimmy Rave, Austin Aries, Jay Lethal, and Nigel McGuinness, partnering with promotions in Japan and England, women's promotion Shimmer, renewing their partnership with TNA, and introducing the Pure Championship, Ring of Honor was back on the upswing. Though they would lose some stars, ROH in 2005 to 2008 was probably its best time period. They loaded up their roster again with some of the best wrestlers on the scene, Kevin Steen and El Generico, Chris Hero, Takeshi Morishima from Japan. They focused on a new nucleus of Bryan Danielson, the Briscoes, Delirious, and Roderick Strong. During this time, Ring of Honor would expand onto pay-per-view and were featured in the acclaimed film The Wrestler. ROH was growing. They had larger crowds and even debuted in the historic Manhattan Center. All of their shows seemed to be can't miss. Ring of Honor was on fire. 2008 would see another major change to the company when in October of that year it was announced that Gabe Sapolsky had been relieved of his duties as booker. Rumors swirled about the reasons, but a major disconnect between Gabe and Cary seemed to be signing a TV deal. Cary Silkin knew his pockets were only so deep, and that there needed to be more income coming in than just ticket sales and DVDs. Gabe had always been very adamant and very public that ROH was a DVD product and not to expect a TV deal on the horizon, and the pay-per-view deal seemed to be good enough for him. This issue, coupled with Gabe's all-out every match and every show is 4 hours approach, and he was gone, quickly replaced by Adam Pearce. Soon after Gabe's departure, ROH signed a TV deal with HDNet, a cable company founded by Mark Cuban, which at the time was groundbreaking for being the first all-HD network. It wasn't a great deal, but ROH was scheduled both in the afternoons and in an 8 p.m. Saturday night time slot, so folks had time to discover the company. But HDNet's footprint wasn't large enough to really change their financial fortunes. But it did give the company and its talents much needed experience producing and working on a wrestling television show. The promos improved, and the characters got just over the top enough to where it made the shows a little more interesting than before. They also signed a retail DVD deal that saw ROH put out some best ofs, but also didn't seem to grow the audience much more. Between 2008 and 2011, ROH would see massive talent overhauls as well as a revolving door of bookers. Adam Pearce did a good enough job, but many fans felt he was pushing an NWA partnership too hard and at the expense of certain talent. He was replaced by Delirious, who brought some things back around for what ROH fans had come to expect. Delirious was then paired up with, but really replaced, by Jim Cornette. The change, while welcome at first, angered a lot of fans over time. Cornette brought tons of experience and was highly praised creatively before Ring of Honor, but his old school Southern wrestling approach just wasn't what fans wanted. Again, things seemed to be on the downturn, and again, Cary's pockets were only so deep without other revenue streams, and it was later revealed that Final Battle 2010 could have been ROH's last event. But the company chugged along until the spring of 2011, building stories and characters, and this was when, with the help of Cornette, Cary Silkin finally sold Ring of Honor to Sinclair Broadcasting Group. Once under Sinclair ownership, Joe Koff was placed in charge of the company. Koff had worked in and around wrestling with the NWA back in the 80s and early 90s, so he was familiar with putting on a successful wrestling show. One thing that cannot be questioned is Joe Koff's love for Ring of Honor. It was his baby. He may not have birthed it, he may have adopted it, but he loved ROH as if it was his own. In 2014, ROH entered its biggest promotional partnership to date with New Japan Pro Wrestling. This deal allowed ROH access to the hottest thing in wrestling at the time, the Bullet Club. Soon, ROH talents would join Bullet Club, solidifying their relationship even more. And by 2019, ROH was ready for their biggest moment in company history, G1 Supercard with New Japan in Madison Square Garden. It was a major milestone for the company and the wrestling world, as they were the first non-WWE wrestling show in MSG proper in about 60 years. And this show would appear to be the height of Ring of Honor's success. There's a lot of fair criticism to be said about Sinclair's ownership of Ring of Honor, from their slow rebuild approach, to their poor attempts at finding a national cable home for the company, to their one-year contracts that made building momentum and stars difficult, and it also allowed the elite to walk and form AEW. But there's also been a lot to praise. There was the aforementioned MSG show, they built their streaming service Honor Club, established a standalone Women of Honor division, brought back the Pure Championship, which helped them distinguish themselves among the competition, and they had some pretty damn great wrestling matches. It's unknown what Ring of Honor's future holds in 2022. Maybe they'll come back. Maybe Sinclair will decide to pull the plug. Whatever happens, it's undeniable what ROH has done for wrestling in its almost 20-year existence. Without Ring of Honor, WWE's in-ring product doesn't become what it is today. Without Ring of Honor, the indies don't become as big as they are today. And without Ring of Honor, there certainly wouldn't be an AEW. As someone who's loved ROH all the way back since 2004, it's hard to watch it fall so far off the wrestling radar and potentially closing down entirely. I'll always be thankful for the memories of shows and all the hours I spent on the old ROH message board debating what Project 161 would be. Thank you for the memories, Ring of Honor, but especially thank you to the incredibly talented men and women who came through its doors the last 20 years. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Thanks for watching.